Canada supports Israel fundamentally because it is right to do so. This
Prime Minister Stephen Harper speaking at the Knesset, Israel's parliament, earlier today. The Prime Minister getting a bit of a hero's welcome. May have been one quite heckler, but otherwise it's been a very welcoming trip for the Prime Minister. Our own David Akin is traveling with the PM, filed this report.
Well, it's been quite a day, Brian. In fact, it's going to be quite a week for the Prime Minister. He started off with a bit of a cultural component, visiting the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. And as you know, many people know, this is a very special place for many Christians because many Christians believe that the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem is where Jesus Christ was born. So the Prime Minister got his day started with a tour there, and from then was motored up to Ramallah in the West Bank for a meeting with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. It's the Prime Minister's first ever visit to the West Bank, just as it's his first ever visit to Israel. The two men met for about an hour and a half. The Prime Minister came with a check for $66 million, money that is going to go to Palestinian refugees, to support Palestinian entrepreneurs, develop the rule of law, support the creation of a Palestinian state. Because again, Canada believes in the two-state solution, a Palestinian state living peacefully side by side with a safe and secure Israel. That was the morning affair for the Prime Minister, so he was up there for about an hour and a half. Then returned to Jerusalem, spent the afternoon going over the fine touches of this rather remarkable speech that he gave right here at the Knesset. And that speech, and I know you're going to talk about this a lot, is that that speech essentially sketching out the rationale for why the Prime Minister is a big fan of Israel, essentially saying nothing to do with his own religion, he's an evangelical Christian, everything to do with supporting democracy, human rights, freedom, and the rule of law. And then working from there to saying, well, if we are going to support Israel, what does that mean? Among other things, it means I'm not going to single out Israel for criticism. And in fact, when you do single out Israel for criticism, you are by definition being anti-Semitic. That's the day, the Monday, here in Jerusalem.
Joining me now from our studio in Toronto is Sam Ashkenazi. He is with B'nai B'rith Canada. Sam, I want to ask you about the Prime Minister's speech and what David just touched on. I guess it's what he's referring to as the new anti-Semitism. Israel is singled out more than any other country at the United Nations. Time and again, there will be atrocities committed by other regimes. Even the Assad regime has not been criticized as much as Israel. Were you guys happy with that part of the speech?
I think, yeah, that's definitely what we were looking for at B'nai B'rith. I mean, we're very concerned. A lot of times, criticism of Israel is, it's perfectly fine. You want to say, I have a problem with this Israeli policy. Israelis will be the first ones to tell you that they, don't really like what's going on in the government sometimes. But when you single out Israel and you say Israel is the worst human rights violator, you completely ignore what's going on in Syria, what's going on in North Korea, in the Sudan. You say Israel is the worst country in the world. I really think you're crossing a line. And so we're very happy to see the Prime Minister take that stance very strongly.
Well, there's a British MP, I believe it was just over the weekend or it was further back last week, tweeted out a picture. There was a protest in his district. He tweeted out a picture of the protest and said, look, there are Nazis in my riding now. And what was he referring to? Someone waving an Israeli flag. So this is around the world, this sort of thing goes on where Israel is singled out. Israel is referred to as an apartheid state or a Nazi state, or all these things. Criticism that is not leveled at other regimes that don't have the rule of law, that don't have courts that will take the government to task.
Well, that's the problem. A lot of sensible people, if you told them, it's all the Jews' fault, it's a Jewish conspiracy, it's the Jews, this, and that, they would say, these are the canards we've heard before from the Nazis. But these days it's become a bit more sophisticated. It's perfectly fine to say in polite society, this is a Zionist conspiracy, the Zionists this and the Zionists that, the Zionist entity is the worst human rights violator. And, that goes along with what you're talking about. It's just an unfortunate evolution of a problem that we thought we had dealt with during the Second World War.
Now, the Prime Minister did deliver $66 million worth of foreign aid to the Palestinian territories. Not something that I'm crazy about because I'm critical of foreign aid, but he did deliver that. He does support the two-state solution, and they did put out a news release from the Foreign Affairs Department as the Prime Minister was headed to Israel, criticizing settlements in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria. Your thoughts on that? Does that show that he's anti-Israel or he's favoring the Palestinians? Because you never hear about all these other things from the people that say Prime Minister Harper is too one-sided.
Well, I think the Prime Minister understands that in order for there to be a viable Palestinian state to live in peace and security alongside Israel, they have to have the institutions to do so. There's unfortunately a lot of corruption that goes on in the Palestinian Authority, and I think the Prime Minister recognizes and hopes that this money will go to creating those institutions. I believe the $66 million was supposed to go to justice, some courts, and training of judges. And I think that's the first step in getting a viable Palestinian state, is having those institutions that any country will need.
All right, Sam, thanks for dropping by today, and all the best. Unfortunately, you didn't get to go on the trip, but neither did I.
Exactly.